All right, number 5 on our list, right down in your bulletin, coming up is Gale Buck from Raleigh, North Carolina. Gale Buck.
Good afternoon. I need you to look under your seats and hook your seat belts. We're going for a test drive. You see, my nephew, Trevor Buck, is a salesman for Hendrick Chevrolet in Apex. And recently he got a nice award for being top salesman, sold 20 cars. Now, because 5 of these cars were high-performance Corvettes, special edition Camaros, they also offered him an opportunity to test drive an experimental BMW. There are only 4 of these cars in the world, and one of them was going to be in Wilmington for just a couple of days. Unfortunately, Trevor could not make it down there for the test drive, but knowing that I was rebuilding my Subaru Forester, he likely offered me the opportunity. I quickly made an appointment with the factory representative with the car to meet at my parents' house in Wilmington. When the car arrived, it was pearl white, model ZX6i. It looked like one of these great big crossovers shrunk down into a high-performance sports car. The factory rep walked me around the car and opened the driver's door. I slid into one of the most comfortable, luxurious seats I had ever felt. Hand-rubbed leather, and it cushioned me with absolute support. Then I looked up at the console. A lot of people talk about how their dashboard looks like it came out of a jet airplane. Not this one. Polished mahogany and simply perfect. Not a single gauge I did not need, and every one of them was right where I expected it to be. Absolutely elegant presentation. Then the factory rep asked me, "What kind of music do you like?" Well, I'm in new age, so he found a radio station, and the sound was incredible. The entire car became a music chamber. I got ready to pull out, and the rep asked me if we could stop and get something to eat. Well, we had an hour and a half for the test drive, and he had heard about a place that sells alligator. Why not? He punched Alligator Restaurant into the GPS, and sure enough, there's a place that serves alligator on Alligator Creek just south of Wilmington. Well, we were off. I pulled out on Porter's Neck Road, and the test drive was underway. The GPS advised, in 200 feet, turn left on Market Street. Well, I don't really like Market Street, 741 stoplights. As soon as I could, I got off Market to the right fork down Princess. You are off course. At the next intersection, turn left on Henry Street. I looked down and the GPS had turned yellow. But I had an idea where I was, and I didn't want to go back to Market, so I kept going. When we passed Henry Street, the GPS went from yellow to orange. A block later, it demanded, turn left on Clay Street. Again, I didn't slow down. The GPS turned bright red, and suddenly the car stopped. Then turned left on Clay Street. I tried to turn the wheel, and the GPS had disengaged me from the electronic steering control. The factory rep was going crazy with his iPad trying to figure out what to do. When we reached Market Street, the car stopped and turned right. The factory rep looked over and said, pull over, ease the wheel to the right." When we stopped, the GPS got upset. "We have not reached our destination. Why are we stopping?" I looked around and saw we were in front of a florist. "I would like to get some flowers for my wife." Then the factory rep told me we could not disengage the GPS and would have limited controls until we reached our destination. I started to ease back into traffic, and the GPS called, "You did not get out of the car." "No, their flowers were too expensive." Well, we hit a couple red lights, and then the lights started turning green. The GPS had figured out the timing on the stoplights and set non-stop travel. Oh, it was nice. We got down, turned left on 3rd Street, heading for the big bridge. I looked over at the rep and asked, how often does this thing update? "Oh, every 24 to 48 hours, depending upon our change in location." We got to the base of the big bridge, and there was a barricade. It seems a barge had hit the bridge the night before and knocked the top out. But the GPS guided the car through a hole in the barricade that the highway department was using so they could get up and inspect the damage. Men started waving their hands trying to get us to stop, but we only accelerated up the bridge. Highway inspectors had to leap out of the way as this $350,000 car sailed across the top that was not thick and began to fall. The factory rep was in a pant going through his iPad. I grabbed and turned the steering wheel back and forth. I pumped the brakes as hard as I could, and I ran that gear shift to every position at least 16 times. Like that was going to stop us from falling. Suddenly we heard the wheels rotate underneath the car, and the tires inflated big. It turns out this particular model BMW was designed by an engineer who liked to ice fish. He liked to be comfortable. He designed it so the tires would rotate under the car, and the wheels would inflate and have absolute perfect control and traction. As we hit the water, the car bobbed just a little bit. The wheels started spinning, and we went up the river. When we reached the riverbank, the tires deflated, and the wheels went back vertical again. We exited around Battleship Memorial along the Highway 17 bypass heading south. The factory rep was in tears, and I was numb. My hands still on the wheel so tight, my knuckles were white. Just before we hit the Brunswick River, the car stopped and turned right down an almost invisible road. We sloshed through puddles until we arrived at Andy's Alligator Haven. I want you to know those burgers were really something else. Didn't taste anything at all like chicken. But when we got back into the car, I asked the rep, "Can I drive home?" He smiled and looked down the GPS. "Back to origin, travel assistance only. Proceed 200 feet and turn right." We got back up on Highway 17, heading south, and the GPS advised, "In 50 feet, do a U-turn." Well, we were heading back towards home, back to my parents' house. When we got to the exit for the bypass, the GPS called out very loudly, "Take the US 17 bypass exit. The bridge to downtown is closed." Well, we were going around Wilmington on the bypass. And the GPS called out to me, "Sir, are you still interested in flowers for your wife?"
Gale, your GPS is much more interesting than mine. Mine is just giving up on me and it just says, "Oh, find your own way." And I